Diabetes can be conquered, and it can be conquered quite easily, whether it's type 1 diabetes or type 2. Type 1 diabetes is usually if the pancreas is damaged, and it is said that the cells don't make any insulin, but I have seen pancreases revive once they're given the right conditions. So, as I have mentioned several times before, page 127 of the Ministry of Healing states, in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Wrong habits corrected and unhealthful conditions changed. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. So let's have a look at some of the main causes of diabetes. Number one, believe it or not, is food. And there are some foods that cause diabetes, and there are some foods that can heal diabetes. So what I'd like to begin with is looking at what is causing diabetes. And never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten so many carbohydrates. So let's do a carbohydrate assessment. In fact, they used to be called starches, but mostly they're called carbohydrates now. And for breakfast, most people are having cereal. There's a little book called Serial Killer by Alan Watson, and this is the serial killer. And he states in that book that 93% of American children have cereal for breakfast, and 30% of the cereals are sugar. And by the age of 3, 1 in 3 American children are obese. And I'll show you why. Also bread. Bread is a very popular food. Bread and cereal are very popular. They're just fast. They're just there. And pretzels. That's an American favorite. I'll say cakes, but I'm probably also considering donuts, cookies, things like that. So I'll say etc. Pasta, very popular food. Pie, I know in Australia pies are popular. Pizza, Europeans have introduced Americans and Australians to this fast food. Also rice and potatoes. And last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugarcane plant. It's one of the most lethal substances, I believe, that has been introduced to the human frame. Now, all of these foods in the gastrointestinal tract break down to a little substance called glucose. And as I showed in my previous presentation, glucose now can come into the blood. And it goes into the blood, then it goes on the M1 main highway straight to the project manager, which is the liver. And then the liver sends the glucose to the cell. So let's have a look at what's happening in the cell. So the glucose comes into the cell, and it comes in under the action of insulin. Insulin increases 30-fold the amount of glucose that can get into the cell. So let's draw a little pancreas here for our illustrations. This is the pancreas, and it lives under our left rib, and it releases insulin. And insulin's role in the body is to get the glucose out of the blood and into the cell. So it comes down into the cell and it goes through a 20-step pathway. That 20-step pathway delivers 2 units of energy, and the end result of that 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse. It's called the powerhouse because even though it's only an 8-step pathway, it delivers 36 units of energy. Very impressive. And as we've looked at already in a few of our lectures, that this is an aerobic pathway because it uses oxygen, whereas this pathway is an anaerobic pathway because it produces energy by the process of fermentation, not oxygen. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we have still got glucose left over. So first place is the cell. Now the second place that the liver will cause the glucose to go is to be stored in the muscle cell like a little bunch of grapes, but they're little molecules of glucose. And they're called glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. They're just waiting there, ready to be used. Yesterday, I had breakfast like a king. Yesterday, I had lunch like a queen. Last night, I had tea like a pauper, which was a drink of water. I woke up this morning and I did my high-intensity run. I found a few hills. Where did I get the energy? I hadn't had anything to eat the night before. Where did I get the energy? It's my glycogen stores already in the muscle cell, just waiting to be used. And when I start using the body and my 20-step and 8-step pathway starts speeding up, basically it starts saying, fuel. These little molecules of glucose called glycogen just get plucked, fed down the pathway, plucked, fed down the pathway. It's an amazing design. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. So the third place that the body stores the glucose is as fat. Let's do our fat cell. Here it is over here. And on this high carbohydrate diet, many Australians, many Americans, many in the Western countries are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what do many people do to try and stop getting fat? Try to lose weight, they stop the fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. What makes you fat is this high carbohydrate diet releasing the glucose, forcing the liver to store it as fat. And that's what fat is, excess fuel. Excess fuel that hasn't been able to be used by the body. And you put also into the equation people eating breakfast like a pauper, lunch like a pauper, and the king and the queen together. All they're doing is going to sleep, and then that forces the liver to store all that excess again as fat. Now, understanding this principle is pivotal in understanding diabetes. You see, when sugar goes in, blood glucose levels rise. Very quickly the brain says, quick, we need a high amount of insulin because the blood glucose levels are too high, so we've got to get the glucose out of the blood into the cell or storage as glycogen, any more around than it's stored as fat. And so the insulin's released and the blood glucose levels go down. But high glucose demands high insulin. Now we've got another problem. Now blood glucose levels are going too low. Brain says, oh no, we're running out of fuel. Quick, stop the insulin and release the glucagon. Glucagon is the hormone designed to get the blood glucose levels up. Blood glucose levels up. Insulin's designed to get the blood sugar levels down. So the pancreas releases these two hormones, and these two hormones are designed to balance the blood glucose or the blood sugar levels. So after the effect of insulin taking it down and glucagon being released, what's also happening is when a person's down there, what do they usually do? Oh dear, I need something. Quick, give me a lolly. You call it candy, we call it lolly. Give me a Mars bar, give me a Coke, a coffee with 2 teaspoons of sugar. Will that get it up? Oh yes. Boom! Now we're going too high. Body says, oh no, we're too high. Stop the glucagon, release the insulin. Boom. Oh no, we're too low. Can you see what's happening? Crisis, 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 crisis. Now something happens. The cell is actually starting to say, I'm sick of the sight of you. And so it develops insulin resistance. Insulin resistance develops, blood glucose levels stay high,